for someone that wants a kind of a 90-second version of David's life, give us this kind of history over his life and all the trouble that he actually had in his life and how you kind of put it all together and made it fit 2020, which I saw a little meme the other day that if 2020 was a swing set and it was a bunch of swings sitting right next to a brick wall.
Yes.
So the idea that people are making jokes about 2020 and all of that, but David's life is the perfect overview to help us through 2020.
Well, you know what happened with David was really interesting. You know, he was a boy. You know the story, how Samuel came and he was looking for the next king, and David was out in the field with the sheep. He was the shepherd boy, and he came in, and finally Samuel says, "No, he's the one." The man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. David's the one, and he anointed David to be the next king. Now, the interesting thing is, from that moment until David actually became the king, 15 years passed.
Wow.
From the time he was anointed till he became king. And those years were, I'm talking about, those were 220 years, 20 years for David. Everything that you can imagine happened to him. And he didn't always do the right thing. I mean, he made a lot of mistakes, as we know. I was reading the other day a great verse in the book of Kings that says, "And David loved the Lord with all his heart, with the exception of the matter of Uriah."
Oh my goodness.
God said David, he lived his whole life, and there was one exception, and in the matter of Uriah, of course, that's the Bathsheba story. God looked at his life, and he made an exception, but he didn't cancel out his life. He said, and then, of course, after that whole thing, David was a man after God's own heart, and God used him in an amazing way. But during those 15 years, he lived our 2020.
Yeah.
And if you read about all the things that happened to him, on one occasion, Matt, Saul had 30,000 soldiers looking for David, one guy. That's how much he wanted him out of the picture.
Wow.
And everywhere David went, everything he did. One time he was in a place called Ziklag. I remember that story particularly. And he went out on an occasion, and when he came back, the enemy had come and taken all of their wives, all of their children captive, and David was turned on by his own friends. All the people in his army said, "This is because of you. This is your problem, David." And they wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
And that's where you find that little phrase, the Bible says, David encouraged himself in the Lord.
Yeah.
And I thought, because that's all he had left.
Right.
There was nobody left. All of his enemies were after him. All of his friends were after him. He was alone, but he encouraged himself in the Lord. Boy, I'll tell you what, I've been doing that a lot lately. How about you guys?
Yeah, totally.
Dr. Jeremiah, you are having church, right? You're having church, but you're doing it uniquely.
We were told that we couldn't have but a very few people in our buildings, but if we had church outdoors, we could. And I walked outside of the building that day, and there's this huge parking lot out there, and it's actually tiered, like it almost has a balcony.
Wow.
And I said to my guy, "Why don't we have church here?" So we put up a big stage. I mean, the stage is like the stage they build for rock stars with all kinds of lights. We got 2 huge, big LED screens, and people come, and we have the chairs separated so families sit together and it's safe. And we had 2,000 people in church.
Nice.
And you know, I'll tell you what, after you've been preaching to empty seats for 16 weeks,
wow,
that's like the most wonderful thing you can ever experience. I actually felt like I was back in the ministry last week because people were there.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And so many of them just said, "You know what, we came in our cars, we walked to our seat, we didn't talk to very many people, went back to cars, but it was so wonderful just to be back." You know, the Bible says we're not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. And however we can do that, the best we can do it. We've kept all the rules. We've not tried to get in the government's face. I know some of my buddies are doing that. I don't see any purpose for that.
No.
We're doing the thing they've allowed us to do, And instead of talking about what we can't do, we figured out what we could do.
Nice.
And that's what
Great.
we're doing.